Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar Weekly Discussion Topic video. This one, as you can see from the title, is going to be about how to get people into Avatar, the best ways to do it, which episodes to recommend, like approach, that sort of thing. This is one that was suggested that I do, a topic that was suggested to me, and I'm finally going to do it. It was suggested a couple of weeks ago, and I'm only getting around to doing it now, but obviously we're still kind of in the holiday season. It's a good time to do it, so it's somewhat fitting of a time to actually cover the topic. So let's, I suppose, get straight into it with the idea of, like, I think of course recommend people Avatar first before Korra. Nothing wrong with Korra, I just think there's no like clear reason why you would go for Korra first, just because you're instantly giving people the opportunity to have the references in Korra by showing them Avatar first, and you could confuse people if you show them Korra prior to Avatar, because Avatar in general, I mean Korra in general, does kind of assume that you know all of the previous stuff. It's not a incredibly like introductory to the universe type thing. It's more of just like, oh, things have changed. So I think the biggest thing is just how you actually approach, suggesting it to someone. Because I think the usual barriers to people just watching it of their own accord is that, oh, it's a Nickelodeon show, it's a cartoon, it's on, it looks kiddie, maybe they've seen one or two clips and maybe it's some of the more jokey bits, and they don't think it's actually anything of note, that it's just this random, somewhat actiony show that happens to be on Nickelodeon. I think Nickelodeon, just in any way being involved, I think instantly adds something to it where it's just, it doesn't get any sort of respect. So I think the first thing to just clarify is just kind of tell them that, look, it is one of the most well received like Western animations of all time, like with regards to critical reception from critics and reviewers, and also just it's one of those shows that so many people, they first go to watch it and they instantly get into it. Like if they happen to be a fan of the Nostalgia Critic, mention the fact that Doug Walker got into Avatar and it's now one of his favorite shows. That it's one of those shows that really grabs people, even if maybe there's been some resistance to getting into it for the first time. I think stuff like that is important to get across, that it's one of those shows that you can perceive it kind of weirdly before you properly get into it. I wouldn't overload them with that in terms of going all like fan crazy at them, like, oh, there's all these great moments, it's great, it's the best show ever. Because I think the worst thing you can do as a big fan of something, wanting someone to also become a fan of it, is to overhype, potentially over exaggerate how good the show is, and then leave no opportunity for the show to actually reach the level of hype you've already presented. Just over kind of hyping stuff is probably one of the worst things you can actually do, in that you are setting the bar overly high. Whereas if you just, I think, say just like it's so well critically received, look at the general review scores on all these like websites like IMDb and stuff like that, and just like, people like this show, just present it to them and don't like go crazy about it, and just kind of show them that, look, it's a lot of people like this show, and that's a good way to kind of just show them that it's not just like some really obscure show, in that it is actually really popular kind of all around the place, and that the whole idea of it being a Nickelodeon show, when the kids watch it, isn't necessarily the case. I suppose after that, it's all about the decision about really what episode you kind of start them with, how you approach going into it. In general, this was the main question I was asked, really. The main question, in terms of people wanting me to discuss this, was, what are your thoughts on like which episodes you should show people first to get them into it? My really easy, simple answer is just show them the first episodes. It's a boring answer, I know. I'll get into some discussion on other episodes that I think are good, but in general, I would say this, because here's the thing: Avatar, sure, if you really critically look at the opening episodes, you can definitely say that, okay, the show has better episodes than the first two episodes, the first two-parter, for sure. But they're still really good episodes. They're really good introduction to the world, to the characters, getting the story started. There's, you know, good, decent character stuff in there, starting the journey off. You know, presenting Zuko, the kind of basics of, you know, some basic bending to start it off with, the kind of core basically of the journey for all the characters. You know, Sokka thinks he's a good warrior but isn't quite there. Katara's a waterbender but has no training. And then Aang, as we get revealed in the first two episodes, is the Avatar, but he's very young and kind of ran away from kind of his responsibility, his destiny, and now it's kind of forced upon him that he has to save the world. That's really good, and the first two episodes present that very clearly. Another reason I would definitely start them off with the beginning is the extended intro narration from Katara. We get this on every episode, but it's extended within the first episode, and it gives you just that extra bit of insight into the world in terms of explaining it. We get, she talks, I suppose, more about her family, the fact that my father's just gone out at war, and just establishes the universe quite well. And even though I would criticize potentially the first two episodes for the humor being slightly more kiddie, you know, more in line with normal Nickelodeon shows, I think just the intro giving you a sense of like genocide is involved, war, the bending, the four nations, just how well it explains the kind of concepts, what the Avatar actually is, straight away in that intro, really helps to give you an idea of like, okay, we're going to start off a little bit slow, but we're going to get to a point where we're dealing with these bigger topics. And so that's why I think the first two episodes are actually really good to show. What I would say though is if you're doing it in kind of smaller chunks, for sure show people the first three episodes. Don't stop at two. If you're watching them in a chunk, add the extra like 20 minutes on and watch the third episode as well, because I think that third episode is the one that really grabs people. I think the first two episodes are good, they introduce things really well. It's that third episode that I think represents what the show can be and what the points that it gets to more often in the series. Just what the Southern Air Temple actually does with regards to Aang finding out what happened to his people. It's a much more kind of powerfully emotional moment in the series than I think a decent amount of the stuff in the first two episodes. Kind of Zuko's rivalry with Zhao in the episode that is presented here, and kind of the reveal in that episode that Zuko's not the bad guy. Zhao more represents the badness in the Fire Nation, and then, you know, the Agni Kai at the end is really, really strong, and presenting Zuko as just this amazingly complex character. Iroh, I think, is becomes a lot more interesting with that third episode. That is such a strong Iroh episode. So for sure, the first three episodes as a chunk is what you kind of need to introduce people into the show. I think stopping at two, you are going to grab a decent amount of people, but not everyone. I think you should in the first three episodes, and you really, really get everyone kind of invested. I think there's very few people who wouldn't see a strength to the third episode of Avatar. I really do think it's that good. But as I said, that's the boring answer, just to start with the beginning. Are there any other episodes that you could start people off with to maybe give them a better insight into the story, to kind of maybe avoid some of the slower intro stuff? For me, the only one that instantly comes to mind would be episode 12, The Storm. I think this would be an okay episode to show someone as their first episode, to maybe give them a better insight into kind of the kind of plot, the character core of the series, in that it's an episode that doesn't really spoil anything with regards to the plot, but you're developed into the series. At this point, the kind of characters are more established, and this is an episode that I think very clearly gives you the backstory of Aang and the backstory of Zuko. And I think just those backstories are a really good way to kind of, I suppose, intro the characters to people. Kind of finally, like, learning, I suppose, the kind of the history with Zuko behind, you know, the scar, why he is the kind of way he is. Then with Aang, obviously finding out what exactly were the events leading up to him running away and being trapped in ice, and kind of having their kind of paths collide during the storm, but obviously Aang having to save his friends, Zuko having to save his crew, keeping them kind of apart from each other for now, but kind of highlighting this idea of they're both kind of on these kind of quests for their destiny, Aang to become the avatar that stops the war, and Zuko right now very confused, but thinking that his destiny is to eventually kind of redeem himself with his father, get his honor back, and be the prince of the Fire Nation again. But is that truly his destiny, is kind of the idea presented, as Iroh kind of talks about, you know, like, you have to do all of that. So I think the Storm is a pretty strong episode. It's pretty emotional. You don't get a ton of bending in the episode, but you do get the big kind of storm action set piece towards the end. The episodes that other people potentially recommend, I saw in the comments discussed when this topic came up as a potential for me to do. People were saying, the Blind Bandit's a really strong episode. Character stuff, introducing Toph. Toph's a really cool character. I absolutely wouldn't recommend people to show people that as their first episode. Purely because I think if the idea is, if you're getting someone to a show and you know them, you almost want to watch it with them to get their reaction to things as they happen. So straight away, I think introducing Toph immediately, kind of, and her joining the group, kind of spoils a lot of the build-up from the start of Book 2. The whole idea of Aang trying to find an earthbending teacher, and you kind of obviously thinking at the start of the book, oh, he has to go back to Bumi. It has to be Bumi that becomes his earthbending teacher. And then the reveal that it's not Bumi. Then you see the hint at Toph in the swamp, and then you eventually get to the Blind Bandit, and there she is. I think that build-up works so well in that it's not a huge plot, but it's something that he is searching for an earthbending teacher, and then it's kind of a very surprising thing when it turns out to be this fairly small girl, but she's so powerful. She's blind and is such an interesting character. I think I definitely wouldn't spoil that for people as their first episode to get them into the show. In that I think part of the what makes Toph so interesting is that she does come in like a season and a bit into the show, but still manages to capture the attention of so many fans and become one of the fan favorite characters. Straight away introducing her and then kind of starting the series and then you having to wait like 25 episodes to get to Toph is perhaps not the best way to do it, in that you're showing them this really cool character that they won't get to for a while. So I think keeping Toph kind of back until you actually get there is a good way to do it. Equally so with, I think, anyone trying to get people into the show by showing them one of the really big kind of key battles or fights or emotional moments. Probably not the best way to do it. I think you can do it with early on stuff like the Southern Air Temple or the Storm, but potentially like showing them Crossroads of Destiny, the fights that happen in that episode, or even maybe emotional stuff from the Guru, or, you know, fights like the Drill, or like even as some people potentially would recommend, some of the bigger moments like Bloodbending or the final fights. Absolutely, I wouldn't do that, because part of the reason why Book 3 was so good is that there was so much build to these big fights happening, and then when they actually did happen, they delivered so well. So I think a lot of choosing which episodes to show to start off is about managing the idea of, like, if you do get them invested in the show, have you actually ruined certain moments of the show for them? Now, I'm one who doesn't really care massively about spoilers on things, but I think, again, the whole idea of, like, you kind of trying to get someone into the show, you kind of want to experience it with them as they go through the show, and you kind of robbing yourself of seeing their reaction to a big moment because you've shown it to them kind of out of context is probably not the best way to do it. Other than that, I really don't think there's a lot of other great episodes to like start people off with, because like any of the other Book 1 episodes, like I really wouldn't recommend showing people some of the Water Tribe stuff towards the end, because I think the journey to get there is pretty good. A lot of the kind of in-between stuff then, like, you know, after the Storm but before the Water Tribe stuff, it's a little kind of one-offy to kind of really get people invested. Like, would you really show people Bato of the Water Tribe as their first episode, the Deserter, Northern Air Temple? Not really, because they could confuse people. Like, if you show them the Northern Air Temple but they haven't seen the Southern Air Temple, and there's the confusion about, like, wait, what happened to Aang's people? Why is he upset at these people who can kind of fly but they're not airbenders? Like, you have to kind of also be aware of like what lore and like technical aspects of the series have been introduced up to that point. So like absolutely stuff like showing people episode 7 as their first episode of Avatar would be the worst thing you could possibly do. In that, yes, it's the first episode that deals with the spirit world, but getting people invested in the show by showing them such a technically confusing episode like that first part of that arc is not really a good way to do it, because you're probably going to confuse people with spirits and ending, and like it doesn't probably get explained until Korra what exactly was going on there. Episode 8 as like the first big plot episode, I think again you're maybe spoiling too big of a kind of action moment. The everyone coming together in front of that door as Aang is trying to communicate with Roku. I think it's one of the bigger moments early on in the series that I wouldn't like immediately show people straight off the bat. Again, Avatar is not that type of show where it starts off badly, where it just doesn't start and you have to wait ages to get to the good stuff. This is not a Steven Universe type thing, where with Steven Universe, like the first 6-7 episodes, there's really not a lot there. It's kind of one-off episodes, nothing really important presented until they start to introduce some of the other characters and hint at some of the bigger stuff with the series. Avatar, at the very least, has a plot, character, kind of somewhat action-packed opening 2 episodes that have a good intro to them, that establish a lot of the world, but also start the character arcs, start the journey, and get things going. I think they are really good intro episodes. As I said, the only weakness I think is just stuff like the humor is a little bit off, and that obviously improves much more as time goes on. And then the only other recommendation I suppose I'd have is just kind of after the first 3 episodes, just kind of maybe note to whoever you're trying to recommend the show to, just that season 1 definitely would be kind of lower quality than season 2 and 3. The quality kind of goes up and down a bit. Just kind of let them know that after the first 3 episodes, it's going to be a little bit kind of like it's a bit of a journey before we get to the Water Tribe. That it's not super plot focused just yet, and it takes its time. Just I wouldn't like over exaggerate that and like try and make it overly negative, but just kind of let them know that okay, it's not all like the first 3 episodes immediately. There's a little bit of a slowdown where it picks back up, and you get like really funny episodes like the King of Amashu pretty early on, and so on. So that's basically Avatar. I think the best way to do is to start it off with the first 3 episodes. Always show the first 3 as a batch. Maybe episode 12 could work well to show them first or relatively early on. I don't think it spoils too much. Other than that, it's just the kind of usual recommendations. The only other thing I suppose is Korra. As I said, I wouldn't recommend showing people Korra first, but I suppose with regards to getting someone into Korra, I think the first thing to do would be to somewhat take a little bit of a break before going into Korra. Just because you never really know with people, like it's such a kind of mixed bag. Like you see online when people talk about like, I finished Avatar and went immediately to Korra. Some people love it. Some people were very let down that it wasn't the same as Avatar. So I think the best thing to do is like when you finish Avatar, just take a break, like a week or 2 of not really watching any Avatar or anything like that, and then start bringing up the idea of Korra, and presenting the idea that it's it's the next generation. I think that's very clear to get across. That make it clear that it's about newer characters, the next generation, a new Avatar, and kind of hint at the fact that the legacy of the ATLA characters is still there, but it's more about the new characters. And make that, I think, very clear to them going in, because I think the worst thing you can do with this is hype up Korra based on the fact that you will see some of the ATLA characters older, because the appearances are relatively sporadic, that it won't fully kind of satisfy everyone if that's what they're looking for out of Korra. Then as far as episodes go, I really don't think there's a lot to say with Korra. I think you just start with the first episode and go. I don't think there's anything to be gained by showing someone an episode other than Welcome to Republic City first, especially with regards to like season 1. Like, what episode are you going to show them first? That doesn't just kind of get you right into the plot. With Korra, basically all of the seasons are extremely focused. There is no like slowdown like potentially there is with book 1 of Avatar, where you start off pretty strong and then you kind of meander for a bit, the plot comes in, meander for a bit, and then you get to the end. At least with Korra, it is kind of laser focused, almost to a flaw, but that means that it's actually pretty easy to just show them the first episode and then you watch the plot just progress. There's no slowdown in episodes. I don't think there's anything to be gained by showing someone one of the other seasons first. Like, I wouldn't recommend showing book 2 first, book 3 first, or book 4 first. As much as I know people like book 3, do not show people book 3 of Korra first. So with Korra, I think it's super simple. Just show them the first episode and see how that goes. And I think that's basically the gist of the discussion here. For me, it's pretty simple. Avatar is a strong enough show that just starting from the beginning is good enough, because it has a decent amount of stuff to introduce to you. What bending is, what the Avatar is, the structure of the nations, and how bending works with regards to that. A little bit on the spirit world, has to be presented early on. But I think it does it all reasonably well. I don't think it leaves you begging tons of questions. Like even just a couple of episodes in, I don't think you are lost within the Avatar world. I don't think it's that massive of a kind of thing that you need to learn so much about to get into. I think it's all presented really well, hence why it's such a popular show, has such good reviews, has such a large fan base, and people love the show so much because it did do a good job at introducing people. I'm sure there are lots of people out there who have their stories of like which episode they saw first, and they have such great memories of watching this episode first. But I think as a kind of general rule, what worked for you, you can't really just assume is going to work for everyone. And again, like coming back to the like scenario here of you trying to recommend it to a friend or someone, you should give them the best opportunity without spoiling them to get into the show. And for me, starting off with the start is kind of good. And if you really need to, hint at stuff that's to come. Just that there's some really good episodes coming up, but again, don't spoil them on anything, of course. So I'm pretty sure that that's all I wanted to say here. If the people who recommended this topic to me want to know more, obviously ask some questions, continue the discussion in the comments below, and I'll be sure to respond to them and obviously continue the discussion about this topic then. But yeah, I think that's basically all I wanted to say on this. So I'll just end by saying links to my Twitter and Tumblr are in the description on social media. Links also to my Patreon campaign and my PayPal donation link are also in the description if you want to help support my channel so I can make more videos, better videos. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.